return, and thank you for your patience, to our colleague, Ocasio-Cortez. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I again would like to reiterate the gratitude that I have for this committee to be able to hold the space and actually have this hearing. For so long in our country, poverty has been a taboo word. It is something that we're not allowed to talk about, and it is something that we have difficulty acknowledging. And even in just the presence of this legislation that I am putting forward along with my colleagues is literally just to recognize poverty in America. That's it. Just directing someone, agencies, to just measure the level of poverty in this country. It doesn't even direct us to expand social program. We're not even there yet. We're just talking about recognizing poverty, and there is resistance to doing that. Why? Why? I believe that we do not want to recognize the level of poverty in this country, because if we did, it would be a national scandal. And we will have to force ourselves to acknowledge that our systems have failed and that we are not doing enough by our own people in a democracy that is supposed to be by the people and for the people to serve the people of the United States of America, and we're not. And so, moving on, Ms. Hutchinson, I just want to reiterate what everyone in this room knows. You know, you said you don't know why God put you in this room. It is because you have been one of the most powerful witnesses to ever enter that I have seen in my short time here in Congress. And your testimony, I hope, will move and change the tide of how we treat poverty in this country. You know, you brought up something so important, and I want to thank you for pointing out the hypocrisy of this system. My family was poor not too long ago. Many aspects of my family are still poor. My first 3 months here in Congress, I slept on an air mattress and walked to work, and people made fun of me because I couldn't afford a second apartment. And that's with, you know, all of the privileges bestowed upon this office. You brought up something so important, which is the mental cost and price of poverty. You know, you were talking about how you felt self-conscious because you felt like you needed to buy a new outfit. And I understand, because like no one takes the poor seriously. So we feel like we need to get all these degrees and show up dressed a certain way just so that someone can actually believe our story. But I just wanted to let you know that your story has filled up this entire room, has absolutely filled it up. And talk about some things that are crystal clear. 7 million people have not been lifted off of food stamps in this country. They were kicked off food stamps in this country. And people are going hungry. They are going hungry because we like to use the word lift instead of the truth, which was kicked. And we are booting millions of Americans into the streets because we want to believe and dupe ourselves into thinking that we're doing better. We are not. We're not. Ms. Hutchinson, I also want to thank you about bringing up the poverty draft and this idea of a bootstrap. You know, this idea and this metaphor of a bootstrap started off as a joke because it's a physical impossibility to lift yourself up by a bootstrap, by your shoelaces. It's physically impossible. The whole thing is a joke. And when we talk about this poverty draft, about lifting ourselves off the bootstraps, can you talk about that, Ms. Hutchinson? Can you talk about the poverty draft in this country?
I would love to. I think, you know, the thing is there is this assumption that if we do more, you know, I'm not doing enough to lift myself out of poverty, and that's what we keep hearing all the time. You know, what you said about kicking people off the rolls, I spent a whole summer organizing in rural food pantries across West Virginia. I know right now there's a 24-year-old woman with autism who's too high functioning for a disability check, but yet the mania associated with her autism, she has to have a very controlled environment in which to work in. Because of the waiver that West Virginia's, the work requirements, she's no longer getting SNAP benefits. Mm-hmm. You know, so those are the people
that— She's going hungry.
Yes, and the foster kids who age out of the system, who are expected to have a job. In West Virginia right now, the Department of Justice just left our state. They did an investigation because we have 7,000 children in the foster care system because of the opioid crisis. Because I had a junior in high school look at me and I said, why is everybody drunk and high? Because that's what she had just said about her school. And she said, because you can't be poor and happy at the same time. I said, you just described the opioid crisis to me in 10 words and you're a junior in high school. And so it's just, if you do more, okay, but $10 an hour is $19,000 a year. What else are you supposed to do? Because to me, more at home is $10 an hour, $10.50 an hour. We have 23% of West Virginia's child care workers are living in poverty.
The people caring for our own children.
The people in charge of their brain development, their socioeconomic development. Yes, ma'am.
I know I'm out of time, so I'll yield the rest of it to the chair.
Well, again, I want to thank our colleague. Thanks for your patience and waiting. We had a lot of interest, obviously, in this hearing, and I want to thank you for your leadership on your bill, and it's a privilege to co-sponsor. Let me just end by observing this. My roots, I'm the grandson of an immigrant, a woman who came from Ireland. She was a Catholic girl in Protestant Northern Ireland. She came over to the United States in 1920 at the age of 18. She had no skill, except she could sew. She had no education. And when I came along, I decided to look up my Irish roots a little bit. You know what's eerie? If you read about the Irish famine, which was an early form of genocide, a third of the population of Ireland died. Another third emigrated, came here. There were British laws at the time that forbade the Irish in their own country from fishing. There were British laws that forbade the Irish from owning their own land. There were British laws that forbade the Irish from speaking their own tongue or benefiting from their own farming or to get an education. But if you read the British official reactions to the famine, it's eerily similar to what we hear today. It's your own fault. You're lazy. You have too many children. You're illiterate. Somehow intrinsically there's something wrong with you. Even though, to come to that conclusion back in the 1840s, you had to ignore all of the systemic, structural laws and impediments that made it impossible for the Irish to frankly survive when a famine hit their primary food source. We have to get over this idea that there's something wrong with you. Are we a community, one nation, indivisible under God or not? Because if we are, then we help each other. We recognize that through no fault, somebody is in a state we can do something about. And that's the ethos we got to embrace. My Catholic social justice doctrine teaches me that. But so does my citizenship, proud citizenship in this country, because that's who we are as Americans. Thank you for being here today. Ms. Hutchinson, you look great. And thank you for your courage. Thank you for your courage.